ठीक है जी, तो 6th चैप्टर शुरू करते हैं।
ठीक है। तो विल स्टार्ट एट इट विल गेट स्टार्टेड एट इट।
ओके।
आपने बहुत अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन तो किया है, उसका समराइज थोड़ा बहुत जो चैप्टर अप टिल 5।
हम्म।
सो टेल्स यू विन, यू कैन बी रॉन्ग हाफ द टाइम एंड स्टिल मेक अ फॉर्चून। तो ये अभी तक मुझे आपकी बातें सुन के यही समझ में आया कि यस, पॉसिबली दैट वी हैव बीन रॉन्ग हाफ ऑफ द टाइम, कि हमको लगता है कि हमें पता ही है, समझ आ गया है। हाँ, ये जैसे आपने अभी इसके पहले वाली चैप्टर्स का बताया, कॉन्फाउंडिंग कंपाउंडिंग का, दैट वी फील दैट अच्छा कंपाउंडिंग तो पता है, कॉन्सेप्ट कंपाउंड इफेक्ट, या उस पर पूरी पूरी बुक्स पढ़ी है जो आप बता रहे थे। सो या इवन दैट इज व्हाट फील्स लाइक, बट इट इज देयर इज मच मच मोर। तो
जी।
ठीक है, we'll get started. I have been banging away at this thing for 30 years. I think the simple math is some projects work and some don't. There is no reason to belabor either one. Just get on to the next. Brad Pitt accepting a Screen Actors Guild Award. अच्छा, ये ब्रैड पिट ने बोला था। तो Heinz Berguen fled Nazi Germany in 1936. He settled in America where he studied literature at UC Berkeley. By most accounts, he did not show particular promise in his youth, but by the 1990s, Berggruen was, by any measure, one of the most successful art dealers of all time. In 2000, Berggruen sold part of his massive collection of Picasso's, Berquist's, Kles, and Matisse's to the German government for more than 100 million euros. It was such a bargain that the Germans effectively considered it a donation. The private market value of the collection was well over a $1 billion. That one person can
बढ़िया है।
that one person can collect huge quantities of masterpieces is astounding. Art is as subjective as it gets. How could anyone have foreseen early in life what were to become the most sought after works of the century? इनफैक्ट कई बार हमको लगता है कुछ लोग पेंटिंग के 5,000, एक छोटी पेंटिंग के 5,000 लेके आते हैं, हमारे ही फ्रेंड्स थे। तो हमें समझ नहीं आता है, बट यस, इट हैज देयर ओन ब्यूटिलाइज इन द आईज ऑफ द बिहोल्डर। तो उन्हें जिनको वैल्यू पता है तो दे नो। You could say skill, you could say luck. The investment firm Horizon Research has a third explanation, and it's very relevant to investors. The third investors bought vast quantities of art. A subset of the collections turned out to be great investments, and they were held for a sufficiently long period of time to allow the portfolio return to converge upon the return of the best elements in the portfolio. That's all that happens. Can we repeat this line again? एक बार थोड़ा हाँ. The great investors bought vast quantities of art, the firm writes. A subset of the collections turned out to be great investments, and they were held for a sufficiently long period of time to allow the portfolio return to converge upon the return of the best elements in the portfolio. That's all that happens. The great art dealers operated like index funds. They bought everything they could, and they bought it in portfolios, not individual pieces they happened to like. Then they sat and waited for a few winners to emerge. That's all that happens. Perhaps 99% of the works someone like Berggruen acquired in his life turned out to be of little value. But that doesn't particularly matter if the other 1% turn out to be the work of someone like Picasso. Wow. Okay. Berggruen could be wrong most of the time and still end up stupendously right. A lot of things in business and investing work this way. Long tails, the farthest ends of a distribution of outcomes, have tremendous influence in finance, where a small number of events can account for the majority of outcomes. 80-20 भी नहीं है तो 90-10 जैसा बता रहे हैं.
राइट।
That can be hard to deal with. even if you understand the math. It is not intuitive that an investor can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. It means we underestimate how normal it is for a lot of things to fail, which causes us to overreact when they do.
इससे मुझे एक एग्जांपल ये भी याद आ रहा है, जो नेस डेली का नाम आपने सुना होगा।
Uh-huh.
काफ़ी फेमस वो रहे हैं काफ़ी टाइम से। और वो
Hmm.
बहुत ही शॉर्ट वीडियो बनाते थे, 1 मिनट की वीडियो।
Hmm.
और उसके पीछे उनका लॉजिक ये था कि मैं डेली 1 मिनट की वीडियो क्यों बनाता हूँ। उन्होंने कहा कि मैं साल में एक बेस्ट वीडियो बनाऊँ रिसर्च करके। वो तो पता नहीं मुझे कैसे बेस्ट बनेगी, लेकिन मैं अगर
Hmm.
डेली एक बनाऊँ तो मैं बेटर भी होता जाऊँगा हर दिन, और कोई ना कोई दिन
Hmm.
बेस्ट बनी जाएगी।
Hmm.
अगर मान लो पूरे साल में भी एक वीडियो बेस्ट बनी तो वो 0.3% के करीब हुआ, वो तो वन
Hmm.
परसेंट भी नहीं हुआ।
Hmm.
और अभी देखा जाए तो इस समय दुनिया भर में नेस एकेडमी उन्होंने बनाई है, और काफ़ी कुछ उन्होंने अच्छा बनाया है। इवन ही इज़ ऑफरिंग LMS, फ्री LMS। तो बहुत सारे कोचेज वगैरह अपना कंटेंट होस्ट करते हैं उस पर।
बैंगलोर से ही है शायद, है ना? मैंने
जी।
सुना, अभी रिसेंटली सुना था इनके बारे में। बैंगलोर में भी है
हाँ हाँ
शायद,
हाँ,
बैंगलोर में
राइट
ही
राइट।
है शायद।
यस यस, बेंगलोर में भी वो आए थे। तो काफ़ी मीट्सअप
हम्म,
होती रहती हैं इनकी। तो
okay.
और भी इनके बारे में काफ़ी कुछ हो रहा है, वो आने वाले टाइम में डिस्कस करते रहेंगे।
Steamboat Willie put Walt Disney on the map as an animator. Business success was another story. Disney's first studio went bankrupt. His films were monstrously expensive to produce and financed at outrageous terms. By the mid 1930s, Disney had produced more than 400 cartoons. Most of them were short, most of them were beloved by viewers, and most of them lost a fortune. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs changed everything. The $8 million it earned in this first 6 months of 1938, these can actually work as background story also for different
यस यस।
sessions.
हाँ, और जो अच्छे स्पीकर्स हैं या अच्छे कोचेज हैं वो लोग इन सब बातों पर नज़र रखते हैं।
Hmm.
और शायद इतनी बार इनको रिवाइज या रिपीट करते हैं या प्रैक्टिस करते हैं कि हमें लगता है इनको इतनी सारी बातें कैसे पता है।
Hmm.
तो ये उसका भी कंपाउंडिंग इफेक्ट इफेक्ट हो जाता है फिर।
Very true. The $8 million it earned in the first 6 months of 1938 was an order of magnitude higher than anything the company earned previously. It transformed Disney Studios. All company debts were paid off. Key employees got retention bonuses. The company purchased a new state of the art studio in Burbank, where it remains today. An Oscar turned Walt from famous to full blown celebrity. By 1938, he had produced several hundred hours of film, but in business terms, the 83 minutes of Snow White were all that mattered. Anything that is huge, profitable, famous, or influential is the result of a tail event, an outlying one in thousands or millions event. And most of our attention goes to things that are huge, profitable, famous, or influential. When most of what we pay attention to is the result of a tail, it is easy to underestimate how rare and powerful they are. Some tail driven industries are obvious. Take venture capital. If a VC makes 50 investments, they likely expect half of them to fail, 10 to do pretty well, and one or two to be bonanzas that drive 100% of the fund's returns. Investment firm Correlation Ventures once crunched the numbers. Out of more than 21,000 venture financings from 2004 to 2014, 65% lost money, 2.5% of investments made 10x to 20x, and 1% made more than a 20x return. 0.5%, about 100 companies out of 21,000 earned 50x or more. That's where the majority of the industry's returns come from. This, you might think, is what makes venture capital so risky. And everyone investing in VC knows it is risky. Most startups fail, and the world is only kind enough to allow a few mega successes.
कीवर्ड हमें मिला
If you
टेल इवेंट।
Mhm.
अब तक हमें कीवर्ड जो मिला इम्पोर्टेंट वो है टेल इवेंट।
Tail event. Yes. If you want safer, predictable, and more stable returns, you invest in large public companies. Or so you might think. Remember, tails drive everything. The distribution of success among large public stocks over time is not much different than it is in venture capital. Most public companies are duds, a few do well, and a handful become extraordinary winners that account for the majority of the stock market's returns. JP Morgan Asset Management once published the distribution of returns for the Russell 3000 index, a big, broad collection of public companies since 1980. 40% of all Russell 3000 stock components lost at least 70% of their value and never recovered over this period. Effectively, all of the index overall return came from 7% of the component companies that outperformed by at least two standard deviations. That's the kind of thing you would expect from venture capital, but it is what happened inside a boring diversified index. This thumping of most public companies spare no industry. More than half of all public technology and telecom companies lose most of their value and never recover. Even among public utilities, the failure rate is more than 1 in 10. Percentage of companies experiencing catastrophic loss from 1980 to 2014. सबसे हाईएस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी में, फिर टेलीकॉम में, फिर एनर्जी. The interesting thing here is that you have to have achieved a certain level of success to become a public company and a member of the Russell 3000. These are established corporations, not fly-by-night startups. Even still, most have lifespans measured in years, not generations. इसमें मुझे 2019 में जो वो एक हुआ था ना बैंक, किसका था वो, लेमन का, वो
हम्म।
याद आ गया. लेमन ब्रदर्स. Take an example, one of these companies, Carloco, a former member of the Russell 3000 index. It produced some of the biggest films of 1980s and 1990s, including the first three Rambo films, Terminator 2, Basic Instinct, and Total Recall. Carloco went public in 1987. It was a huge success, churning out hit after hit. It did $500 million in revenue in 1991, commanding a market cap of $400 million, big money back then, especially for a film studio. And then it failed. The blockbusters stopped, a few big budget projects flopped, and by the mid 1990s, Carloco was history. It went bankrupt in 96. Stock goes to zero. Have a nice day. A catastrophic loss, and one that 4 in 10 public companies experience over time. Carloco's story is not worth telling because it is unique, but because it is common. Here is the most important part of this story. The Russell 3000 has increased more than 73-fold since 1980. That is a spectacular return. That is success. 40% of the companies in the index were effectively failures, but the 7% of the companies that performed extremely well were more than enough to offset the duds, just like Haynes Berggruen, but with Microsoft and Walmart instead of Picasso and Matisse. माय गॉड, मतलब मुझे लग रहा है ये सब थोड़े मैं ना कैप मतलब लिख लूं, लिख के रख लूं टू रेफर फॉर डेटा पॉइंट्स या फिर फैक्ट्स के लिए या स्टोरी के लिए, दैट वे.
या फिर हम एआई से लिखवा लें,
हाँ, ये
समराइज
भी कर
करके।
सकते हैं. राइट. राइट. Not only do a few companies account for most of the market's return, but within those companies are even more tail events. In 2018, Amazon drove 6% of the S&P 500's returns, and Amazon's growth is almost entirely due to Prime and Amazon Web Series, which itself are tail events in a company that has experimented with hundreds of products, from the Fire Phone to travel agencies. Hmm. Apple was responsible for almost 7% of the index return in 2018, and it is driven overwhelmingly by the iPhone, which in the world of tech products is as tail Y as tails gent. Taily as tails gent. Acha, sorry. Which in the world of tech products is as taily as tails get. Acha, acha. And who's working at these companies? Google's hiring acceptance rate is 0.2%. Facebook is 0.1%. Apple is about 2%. टू द पावर कुछ वहां पे लिखा है या पेज नंबर कुछ लिखा है रेफरेंस के लिए?
हाँ, ये मतलब रेफरेंस के लिए फुट नोट्स वगैरह में कहीं
अच्छा,
बाद में हो।
ओके। Hiring acceptance, okay. So the people working on these tail projects that drive tail returns have tail careers also.
ये भी इंटरेस्टिंग टर्म है, टेल कैरियर्स।
Mm. The idea that a few things account for most results is not just true for companies in your investment portfolio, it is also an important part of your own behavior as an investor. Napoleon's definition of a military genius was the man who can do the average thing when all those around him are going crazy. Okay. It is the same in investing. Most financial advice is about today. What should you do right now and what stocks look like good buys today? But most of the time, today is not that important. Over the course of your lifetime as an investor, the decisions that you make today or tomorrow or next week will not matter nearly as much as what you do during the small number of days, likely 1% of the time or less, when everyone else around you is going crazy. Consider what would happen if you saved $1 every month from 1900 to 2019. You could invest that $1 into the US stock market every month, rain or shine. It doesn't matter if economists are screaming about a looming recession or new bear market. You just keep investing. Let's call an investor who does this Sue. But maybe investing during a recession is too scary. So perhaps you invest your $1 in the stock market when the economy is not in a recession. Sell everything when it is in a recession and save your monthly dollar in cash and invest everything back into the stock market when the recession ends. We'll call this investor Jim. तो यहाँ पे दो तरह के बता रहे हैं। खुशहाली जी, आप पढ़ना चाहते हैं?
नहीं, आप कंटिन्यू करें।
नहीं, आप
ओके।
थोड़ा वैशाली जी आप ले सकते हो बीच में, उनको थोड़ा रेस्ट,
हम्म।
एक दो पेज आप पढ़ सकते हो। और परहैप्स
What? But maybe investing during a recession is too scary.
नहीं, ये वाला पैराग्राफ हो गया।
हाँ, ये वाला हो गया।
और
और perhaps it takes a few months for recession to scare you out, and then it takes a while to regain confidence before you get back in the market. You invest $1 in stocks when there is no recession. Sell 6 months after recession begins and invest back in 6 months after recession ends. We will call you Tom.
मतलब 3 लोग हो गए।
How much money would these three investors end up with over time? Sue ends up with 435,551 dollars. Jim has 2,57,386 million dollars, and Tom 234,476 million dollars. Sue wins by a mile. There were 1428 months between 1900 and 2019. Just over 300 of them were during a recession. So by keeping her cool during just that 22% of the time, the economy was in or near a recession. So ends up with almost 3/4 more money than Jim or Tom. To give a more recent example, how you behaved as an investor during a few months in late 2008 and early 2009 will likely have more impact on your lifetime returns than everything you did from 2000 to 2008. There is the old pilot quip that their jobs are hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. It's the same, it's the same in investing. Your success as an investor will be determined by how you respond to punctuated moments of terror, not the years spent on cruise control. ये पैराग्राफ मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा. मैंने शेयर भी किया था ग्रुप में.
अभी भी ऐसे ही चल रहा है आजकल.
A good definition of an investing genius is the man or woman who can do the average thing when all those around them are going crazy. Tells drive everything. When you accept that tells drive everything in business, investing, and finance, you realize that it's normal for lots of things to go wrong, break, fail, and fall. If you're a good stock picker, you will be right maybe half the time. If you are a good business leader, maybe half of your product and strategy ideas will work. If you are a good investor, most years will be just okay and plenty will be bad. If you are a good worker, you will find the right company in the right field after several attempts, trials. And that's if you are good. Peter Lynch is one of the best investors of our time. If you are terrific in this business, you are right 6 times out of 10, he once said. There are fields where you must be perfect every time. Flying a plane, for example. Then there are fields where you want to be at least pretty good nearly all the time. A restaurant chef, let's say. Investing, business, and finance are just not like these fields. Something I have learned from both investors and entrepreneurs is that no one makes good decisions all the time. The most impressive people are packed full of horrendous ideas that are often acted upon. Horrendous is horrible होगा, पता नहीं. हेलो अल्पना जी.
हेलो अल्पना जी.
बहुत दिनों के बाद दिख रहे.
वेलकम बैक.
म्यूट में बोल रहे हैं.
अल्पना जी म्यूट है अभी.
हाँ जी, मैंने सोचा आप लोगों से थोड़ा मुलाकात कर लूं तो शुरुआत तो करूं कहीं से फिर से.
अच्छा है. अच्छे टाइम पर आए हो, अच्छे दिन पर आए हो. और इसने जी बताएंगे अभी थोड़ी देर बाद कि क्यों अच्छे दिन पर आए हो.
जी जरूर. कंटिन्यू स्टडिंग देन.
जी, थोड़ा सा रह गया बस.
नेहा जी पढ़ना चाहेंगे आप?
हाँ इसने जी आप यहाँ से कंटिन्यू कर सकते हो. थोड़ा से एक तो पेज रह गया है बस.
ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है.
हाँ, डायरेक्ट 2.5 पेज है. जी.
बस मैं यहाँ से फिर से पढ़ती हूँ समथिंग वाला.
Okay.
Something I've learned from both investors and entrepreneurs is that no one makes good decisions all the time. The most impressive people are packed full of horrendous ideas that are often acted upon. Take Amazon. It is not intuitive to think a failed product launch at a major company would be normal and fine. Intuitively, you would think the CEO should apologize to shareholders. But CEO Jeff Bezos said shortly after the disastrous launch of the company's Fire phone, if you think that's a big failure, we are working on much bigger failures right now. I am not kidding. Some of them are going to make the Fire phone look like a tiny little blip. It's okay for Amazon to lose a lot of money on the Fire phone because it will be offset by something like Amazon Web Services that earns tens of billions of dollars. Tails to the rescue. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once announced his company was canceling several big budget productions. He responded, "Our hit ratio is way too high right now. I'm always pushing the content team. We have to take more risk. You have to try more crazy things because we should have a higher cancel rate overall." These are not delusions or failures of responsibility. They are a smart acknowledgement of how tails drive success. For every Amazon Prime or Orange is the new black with certainty that you'll have some duds. Part of why this isn't intuitive is because in most fields, we only see the finished product, not the losses incurred that led to the tail success product. The Chris Rock I see on TV is hilarious, flawless. The Chris Rock that performs in dozens of small clubs each year is just okay. That is by design. No comedic genius is smart enough to preemptively know what jokes will land well. Every big comedian tests their material in small clubs before using it in big venues. Rock was once asked if he missed small clubs. He responded, "When I start a tour, it's not like I start out in arenas. Before this last tour, I performed in this place in New Brunswick called the Stress Factory. I did about 40 or 50 shows getting ready for the tour." Wow. Our newspaper profiled these small club sessions. It described Rock thumbing through pages of notes and fumbling with material. "I am going to have to cut some of these jokes," he says mid skit. "The good jokes I see on Netflix are the tales that stuck out of a universe of hundreds of attempts." A similar thing happens in investing. It is easy to find Warren Buffett's net worth or his average annual returns or even his best, most notable investments. They are right there in the open, and they are what people talk about. It is much harder to piece together every investment he has made over his career. No one talks about the dud picks. The dud picks मतलब इसमें वो foolish के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. Dud वो मतलब है. No one talks about the dud picks, the ugly businesses, the poor acquisitions, but they are a big part of Buffett's story. They are the other side of tail-driven returns. At the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting in 2013, Warren Buffett said he has owned 400 to 500 stocks during his life and made most of his money on 10 of them. Charlie Munger followed up, "If you remove just a few of Berkshire's top investments, its long-term track record is pretty average." मतलब इंटरेस्टिंग, जैसे हम कुछ भी पढ़ते, एक बार शायद लास्ट ईयर मैंने एक कैलेंडर ऑर्डर किया था, उसमें वॉरेन बफेट के बारे में एक पेज आया था जस्ट, तो उसमें इट वाज रिटन अबाउट ऑल ओनली हिज मतलब व्हाट ऑल थिंग्स ही हैज अचीव्ड. सो दे आर टेलिंग कि हमें टेल साइड ऑफ द स्टोरी, बस टेल सक्सेस के बारे में पता है, बट व्हाट ऑल ही हैड 400 to 500 स्टॉक्स, बट उसमें से ज्यादा से ज्यादा जो उनको पैसे उन्होंने कमाए वो उसमें से हार्डली 10 है.
हम्म
So interesting. When we pay special attention to a role model's successes, we overlook that their gains came from a small percent of their actions. That makes our own failures, losses, and setbacks feel like we are doing something wrong. But it is possible we are wrong or just sort of right, just as often as the masters are. They may have been more right when you were right, but they could have been wrong just as often as you. It's not whether you are right or wrong that is important. George Soros once said, "But how much money you make when you are right and how much you lose when you are wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune." There are 100 billion planets in our galaxy and only one, as far as we know, with intelligent life. The fact that you're reading this book is the result of the longest tale you can imagine. That is something to be happy about. Next, let's look at how money can make you even happier.
हाँ जी, तो ये फिर नेक्स्ट चैप्टर की बात कर रहे हैं जो हम कल पढ़ेंगे, फ्रीडम। फ्रीडम, हाँ। फ्रीडम आपने पढ़ा नहीं है ना वृषाली जी भी?
जी नहीं जी।
ओके, तो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग चैप्टर था, इंटरेस्टिंग बुक है।
ये
अर्थात
मूवी
जी
जो
आप।
आपने
जी।
आपने जो मूवी फॉरवर्ड किया, ये फ्रीडम के ऊपर ही है।
हम्म
उसने बहुत सारा कुछ लॉस वॉस देख के फिर सब कुछ करके अपने आप को फ्रीडम स्टेट में ला ही दिया।
हम्म।
जो मतलब जिसको सब कोई क्या क्या कहते थे, पुकारते थे, क्या क्या नाम से, अद्भुत अद्भुत नाम से उसको पुकारते
हम्म
थे। स्टूपिड
हम्म
स्टूपिड बोल के बुलाते थे। और जब सुना उसके पास 100 करोड़ है तो सबके मुंह हाँ के एकदम धरे के धरे रह गए।
हम्म
वैसा इट
हम्म,
इज लाइक दैट वन लास्ट। आई मीन फ्रीडम के बारे में अगर देखा जाए तो यही चैप्टर होगा शायद, या हाउ यू कैन अर्न योर फ्रीडम।
जी।
You face a lot of losses, but of course, at the end of the day, how much wins you get.
यस। तो
जैसे कि
इसमें
ये
ये।
जर्नी जो थी,
हम्म
वो जर्नी ऐसे ही थी कि बहुत सारे हर्डल्स मैंने देखा इस समय, क्योंकि जिंदगी में पहली बार अपने आप से अकेला खुद
हम्म
हर जगह को ढूंढ ढूंढ के निकाल के घूमना पड़ा। और
हम्म
जहाँ की आप उनकी भाषा भी नहीं जानते हो बिल्कुल भी,
हम्म
उनसे हेल्प लेकर
हम्म
ढूंढ ढूंढ के निकालना, और बहुत उमंग उत्साह के साथ, बहुत तकलीफ